Hello, I'm Carol Carter. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Minded. We are all about creating a capable, diverse talent pipeline to get more women, people of color, any way that you can define diversity is how we define it, into the education, economic mobility, and leadership pipeline. And we do that in a number of different ways. We have an annual conference that for the last, this is the second year, has been virtual because of COVID. And we are now in the 9th week of a 10-week-long conference. And next week is all about our first generation to college student leaders and the program for them. So that's kind of the second way we have impact. We have an annual conference. We have a first-gen leadership program that students can connect to role models, mentors, internships, and jobs. And then every single month, many of you know Dr. Paul Miller, we have equity teams led by incredible leaders like Paul, diverse leaders across STEM, K-12, higher education, technology, health professions, and foundations and funders. And those are called Courageous Conversations Catalyzing Change. So if you work with students who are diverse, maybe they don't see themselves in their faculty, maybe they don't see themselves in the teachers teaching them, they can see themselves every single month and be at the table with leaders like this. So we welcome all of you to be here. And it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Paul Miller, who is here with our really important topic this week during our health emphasis, which is called Emerging COVID Strong, Resilient Connections, and the Indomitable Spirit. So Paul is the principal at Green Tech High. He's written a number of different books. He's a nationally and globally recognized leader and trainer. And we're really delighted that he runs the Global Minded K-12 Equity Initiative with our other leaders. Welcome, Paul, and welcome, panelists. Oops, Paul, unmute. There you go.
Welcome, 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 everybody. We're going to talk about how do we emerge strong from this nasty pandemic and come out on the other side with some expertise here. We have some educators in various different capacities who are going to be coming and speaking to everybody today. I'm going to give everybody about 30 seconds just to introduce themselves. Tell us your name, who you are, and what do you do. So I'm going to start with Dr. Joe Martin.
All right, thank you, Paul. My name is Dr. Joe Martin. I'm the founder and creator of an organization called Real Men Connect. We're a faith-based nonprofit organization that helps men win at what matters and even frustrates them the most as husbands, fathers, and spiritual leaders of their homes by giving them help and hope in life's hardest areas for them. And we build stronger men through community. We do it through mentorship, accountability, coaching, and counseling, because we honestly believe that when a man gets it, marriages, families, education, and communities all win. And so in addition to that, I'm also the host of the top-rated podcast on Apple Podcasts for Christian men called Real Men Connect, with now more than 1.8 million subscribers in 136 countries. And I'm excited about lending this part of the element, the man's part of the element, to the education dialogue today. So thank you for having me, Carol.
Thank you, Joe. Next, I see Dr. Marck Abraham. You want to tell us the same thing, brother?
Hey, good afternoon, family. I hope everybody's doing well. Again, my name is Dr. Marck Abraham. I'm just so thankful to be on this panel with all of these great individuals here. I'm the president and CEO of MEA Consulting Services, LLC. We're one of the fastest growing consulting companies in the country. And what we specialize is we train leaders to lead with a primary focus on helping school leaders increase graduation rates for young men of color. I'm excited about my new book that's coming out in a couple weeks, What Success Looks Like, Strategies to Increase Graduation Rates for Young Men of Color. And what I do is I go around the country and I support principals and administrators and superintendents on real practical strategies they can use to turn their school around, but primarily focus on the most marginalized group in the country, which are young men of color. So thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be on this panel.
Next, I see Rina Patel, same thing.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. My name is Rina. I'm the founder and CEO of She. We're redesigning or redefining what social networks and what community looks like for Gen Z today and for future generations. We're building peer-to-peer support networks, mentorship, accessible mental health opportunities, live discussion groups, events for the next generation of female identifying teens.
And last but not least, Dr. Latoya Johnson.
Hello, everyone. As Dr. Miller stated, my name is Dr. Latoya Johnson. I am a special education coordinator. I coordinate the services for students from grade 6 all the way through 12. And I'm here in Albany at Green Tech High Charter School.
Okay, good stuff. So again, I'm glad to have you all here. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a curveball for you guys, because I want the people to get to know you guys better. So why does your opinion or perspective matter on this topic? What have you done to make sure that students have had or will have the best education possible? So basically, why the heck should anybody listen to you? Who are you, and why do people care? So tell us a little more. Like, what do you do for the youth? So anybody can take a stab at it. Let us know what you're about. Anybody? Okay, so I'm gonna pick somebody. Rina, go ahead. Since everybody wants to be shy. Rina,
I just hit the unmute button. I'm about to jump in the water.
You're too slow. Give it to Rina.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's a great question. So I spent the last 10 years working with thousands of youth in over 100 communities globally. I started my work actually right after I graduated from high school. I was a youth myself, 17 years old, started an education and health nonprofit, and really saw the inequalities and lack of infrastructure in rural communities throughout India, and started an organization where we worked with rural communities and youth in those communities to address health, economic, social, and educational inequalities, and brought a lot of those experience back here to the US, and realized a lot of students are lacking the physical tools and resources that they need in order to succeed in this country. But we're also not addressing this huge part around emotional infrastructure that young people need. And so that sort of started this journey of providing the social and emotional skills that young people need to succeed. And so started to kind of expand my work, not just within India, but also across Nepal, throughout the United States, as a facilitator and mediator, which is what eventually led me to starting this company.
Okay, thank you. Mark, go ahead. Since you were about to buzz in and just a little slow with the trigger finger.
Listen, when I used to play Jeopardy when I was young, I just couldn't hit the button on time, So what I have done, I've worked in a lot of facets in education. I was a school counselor. I was an assistant principal. I was dean of students and a principal. And through my career, I've always had the great fortune of putting systems in place to increase student performance. I did it at a middle school, most noted nationally for doing it at a high school, where we took the graduation rate from about 60% up to 87% within about 3 years, and was recognized by New York State for having one of the highest graduation rates for young men of color in the entire state, about 93% graduation rate for Black males. And I did my dissertation on what successful strategies principals can use at the secondary level, meaning at the high school level, to increase student performance for young men of color. And again, like I just said, we have a book coming out. I've written several articles. I've actually had my latest article published in the National Association of Secondary School Principals with my brother, Dr. Paul Miller. And I've written several articles in that magazine. And we also have a conference that we're supporting principals nationally on what strategies they need to employ to get back into school safely to support young students post-pandemic. So that's what I've done. That's who I am, a little bit about my resume. And, just in every area that I've worked in, I've had success with students and taken failing schools and made them successful schools on every round. So, that's a little bit about my resume.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Latoya Johnson, what you got for us?
So for the past 11, going on 12 years, I have been a special education teacher. I have one of my masters in special education, and then I went on to get my doctorate in special education. And, I have learned a lot throughout the years just from schooling and actually working with these students and knowing that they have a voice that needs to be heard as well. They can learn, they just learn a little bit differently. And it's very important as an educator to work with the individuals to really individualize that playing field and level it for them so that they can learn. And they can with different scaffolds and things. So that's what I'm here to say.
Good stuff. And last but not least, Dr. Joe Martin.
I'm going to approach it from a different angle, Paul, as far as you said, why us? Why each individual on this call? Well, I spent over 20 years in education, teaching at the elementary school level, high school level, as well as the university level. The only level I didn't teach was middle school because I'm not crazy. That's just a joke, but that's the toughest, to me, that's the toughest grade to teach. But I walked away from it. You said, why me? I'm going to give you an example with my wife. When I left education to work with men, my wife just lost her mind. She could not understand. You're one of the guilty ones. Why are you leaving? Even Carol probably was thinking, Joe, why are you leaving education? And so no one understood a person who's working with school districts all over the country. I've probably worked with over 750 school districts across the country. And I left it to work with men. And here's why. I try to explain it to my wife, and Paul, I'm explain it to you. My wife says, you should be working with children. You need to be working in education. God called you to work with children. I say, if you were walking by a river and you saw a baby in the water, what would you do? She said, I would get in the water and I would try to rescue that baby. Okay, let's say you rescue that baby. As soon as you rescue that baby, there's 2 more dumped into the water. I said, what would you do? She said, I'll try to save as many as I can. If other people were coming by, I said, what would you do? She said, I would ask them to come help. Save these children, save these babies. Every time we bring one out, there's doubling. There's more coming into the water. And I said, then what if you saw me walking down the side of that river, Tanya? What would you do? She said, come on, baby, come in and help me. And I said, no, I refuse to help you. She said, what? I said, because I said, why do you want me to come to you? I want you to help me save these babies. Well, I'm not going to do that because I want to find out who's the fool throwing the babies in the water. I'm going to fix that problem so you don't have to worry about saving so many babies in the water. My wife got it, and she hasn't given me any griefs ever since I started this organization. I'm in the process of making sure daddy stopped throwing babies in the water. And a good example, Paul, why us think about this, and anybody who's been in education knows this. I know Mark knows this as well, because he works with young men of color. Tell me, how many boys do you have a problem with who has a strong male in the home? How many? Most of the problems we're going to deal with because there's a father wound somewhere in that home. There's something missing. There's something missing. I know from an educator, the kids who I had the biggest challenges with were kids who came from homes that either the father was not there physically or he was there physically, but not there emotionally. So I'm in the process of helping dads save their children, if that makes sense, Paul.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. So thank you. I appreciate all of you, what you guys are doing for students and for kids and just throughout your careers. So how did COVID change the way that you all view education and why? And not everyone has to answer this, but we're just going to start and have a dialogue. But, how did it change? Let's talk about kind of how you thought about education before and now, how do you think about it afterwards?
I don't know if it changed my perspective. I think what I've told educators around the country is that COVID exacerbated the inequities that already existed, meaning it just showed us what us as practitioners knew was already happening, right? So when we look at 4 out of 5 urban schools that have not gone back into the school building because of COVID and because of union issues, it just kind of illuminates and says we really have a problem with equality and equity and providing a quality education for our students, especially our Black and brown and poorer white kids. So the things that I've learned to get out of this is really continuing to push principals and assistant principals and leaders to not be afraid to think outside the box, not be afraid to have high quality systems to track data, to measure the success of students, to understand engagement, and really starting this conversation and continuing the conversation of social emotional health. And one thing that I tell principals and superintendents is we can't miss the teachers and the people that are providing the work, right? So oftentimes we want to go from administrator to kid and not go from administrator, teacher, kid. We have to take care of the mental health of our teachers and everybody that's working with the young people that we service. So hopefully that kind of gave you a broad perspective of how I'm viewing things, Dr. Mo.
Right. So Joe and Rina, you guys aren't in schools per se right now, but so doing the work that you do, has COVID changed your work? Has it changed your view of education at all?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that, I mean, we run a lot of our community is run completely outside of school. We have some school partnerships, but really what we found is that with or without COVID, this generation is really struggling with consistent social interaction. I think they have friends that they keep in touch with from school or from, just communities, but more and more young people are turning to their digital communities for support that I think previously close-knit communities really satisfied. And so many students are looking for, or many teens and students are really looking for those alternatives for support, and many aren't getting it in the home. And so we found that was only exacerbated through the pandemic, and more teens were really struggling and trying to find support systems that they could depend on. And in other, the school used to be that kind of like physical space that they could escape to. So then sort of what happens when that physical space is no longer there? And yeah, so that's I'm sure I have a lot more thoughts on this, but I'll let Dr. Joe Martin go first.
Well, I would add to that, and also what Mark said as well, because it really didn't affect our organization, I guess, directly, but it just reinforced to me the need and the importance of good teachers who are creative and are adept at adopting to new methodologies when it comes to teaching and being more creative in the classroom. If anything, as our organization, the men were more concerned about what can they do to help. But I realize now that, wow, the teachers you're really going to find out who the good teachers are during this pandemic, who were able to adjust and adapt. And I think what Mark said was right on point, that to me, that they're the pivotal point, how the teachers connecting with the students. And so that's what I saw. As far as it didn't really affect us in a negative sense, but it just, to me, just put a light on how important teachers are in the classroom and their ability to adapt.
Can I say this? Again, I just say we could no longer hide anymore.
Right.
Like, before we could say, well, hey, the kids, just ate X, Y, whatever the excuse was. Now with the parents sitting there watching, we can see what's really going on in the classroom, and we can see just the disparities that happen between our suburban counterparts and our urban counterparts, right? Like our suburban schools figured it out. Our urban schools, they got stuck in the mud. And it's nothing that nobody can hide it anymore. We sat there and watched, institutionalized racism. Hey,
not all the urban schools got stuck in the mud.
All right, so we're not gonna
150%, dude.
You said what?
We outperformed the rest of the state by 150%. So before you say all urban schools, I need you to back up off of that a little bit.
All right. So when I say
go ahead.
I say Dr. Miller urban schools, I mean the urban schools we saw in California. We're talking about the urban schools in Baltimore. We're talking about the urban schools district in Buffalo. We're talking about Rochester. We're talking about so in the smaller pockets in the charter schools, again, charter schools were created to create models that we can take back into the public schools. I think so often we get into this public school, charter school fight and not see the beauty and the genius that Dr. Miller was able to do with Green Tech, with Dr. Latoya over there. We should be looking at those models and saying, how can we adopt that instead of just dismissing it and say, oh, that's just that charter school, right? But overall, Dr. Miller, we saw a huge disparity between and I'm not talking about the smaller charter school network, I'm talking about the bigger urban school districts where 50,000 kids go, 100,000 kids go. We saw that they didn't compete academically, and we saw a lot of standstill. So the teachers are so important, and administrators holding people accountable. And I just say one more thing. We I always say this, we can't keep telling us, blaming the parents for the lack of academic success for kids, because we love to throw that out. But if the superintendent and the principals can't hold a teacher accountable, how can parents hold teachers accountable? It just sounds ridiculous. So we really want to, that's kind of the things I saw during this time.
Dr. Johnson, did COVID change the way you view education? Because we have had a lot of success here during the middle of a pandemic. And it's frustrating when I hear what my brother Mark is saying, and I'm well aware that there are plenty of schools weren't successful, and I know why they weren't successful. They just don't want to listen to the reason, and I'm happy to talk about it another time. But Dr. Johnson, what have you seen change?
I don't think the pandemic changed the way I viewed education itself. I think it enhanced it. And for me, it really shined a light on, you look at this era as the digital age, but I learned that digital age has a cap. That's only for social media. But when you try to translate those skills to using the computer, we really had to go back to the basics, like how to copy and paste, how to open up in a document, how to use email, like those things that I just assumed would just be so easy because you guys are playing Fortnite and all of these games on the computer, that these skills would just translate over, but they have caps because they've never used this technology educationally. So it's like, wow, we have to take a step back from curriculum to just let these students know how to do the simple stuff before we, take it all the way up. So I would say that that's what I learned education.
See, I feel like the pandemic gave us an opportunity to reimagine education a little bit, because there were times where with the pandemic, so before the pandemic, I couldn't imagine how we would get every kid a Chromebook. I couldn't imagine how we would make sure that everybody had internet access. I couldn't imagine how students would be able to still learn virtually while they're at home. So like the goal for me was to think about how could we take this and put it into the secret sauce when they come back into the building to give them an enhanced form of education. And so looking at it from an opportunity instead of a deficit. So, but there were a lot of deficits. So I'm gonna go back to Dr. Johnson because you're with students. Can you tell me a story about like the hardest thing one of your students might have experienced during this pandemic, and or something that you dealt with that was so difficult during this pandemic, and what was the outcome? Do you have any good stories for us?
I have so many. I have a student who already has underlying health issues, who was hospitalized for a great margin of time during COVID. And, the doctors were running all the tests and, mom's scared, I'm scared. And just having to, once he did return back to school, having to, with 3 weeks left of the quarter, we really had to prioritize the different things, all of the lessons and the materials that he was missing to really get him back up. Trying to think of another. Come back to me. I have some more. I just want to play with that.
Does anyone else have any interesting stories that, like, what I'm trying to get people to have a feel is of how difficult this pandemic really was for our students, because there's all kinds of, I think of deaths. I think the most difficult thing that I can think of is kids losing 2 relatives within a couple of days to COVID. So I think of things like that. Do you guys have any stories with any of the students or men that you've working with? Anybody, Joe?
Let me unmute myself. Yeah, as far as, because really, you know, I'm not in the classroom anymore, so I'm not dealing with students directly per se, but I am dealing with a lot of men. And what I realized that we had to pivot is being just as creative as the teachers had to be. Is my biggest challenge was trying to connect with them emotionally in person with them. So we had to come up with some creative ideas. It can't just be through the screen, that we had to make it feel like it's high touch. So we were very intentional about creating leadership teams and peer-to-peer. So guys would check on each other, so they didn't feel like they were just totally disconnected. It was interesting to me because I'm thinking, wow, I don't have to deal with the classroom and all the different challenges that we had to face in education, but I still had to do the same thing with the men to keep them engaged, to keep them interested, also give them the support they need to be able to connect with their kids while they're spending more time with their kids at home than they ever anticipated in their lifetime. And they realize, and I can tell you this from dealing with a lot of fathers, and all these fathers are not in the home with their kids. They just want to be very supportive of their children, is that they have a new appreciation for us as educators. They finally get it that, wow, like you said, we're always getting on the teachers all the time about the teacher's not doing this. Wait a minute, these are my kids. I got to teach them now. I got to support them. And they realize how much of a challenge that was. So, but for me, it was keeping the men engaged in creative ways.
Hey, Dr. Miller, I will say that although I wasn't the principal this year, I was in the pandemic beforehand, the first wave. A few things I would say as stories. You know, I had kids that just completely disconnected, and really I had to get teachers to, you know, negotiate with me to get them to the kids' houses, right, through the pandemic and through the crazy where we just lost contact with seniors, where we had to say, listen, I don't care what you're going to do. I want to meet you at this kid's house, and we're going to drop off packets of work, and we're going to go to different houses to make sure that our kids get what they need so that they can graduate in June. Another thing is really, I've spoken to several kids that were my former students that just really were just saying, Dr. Abraham, I don't really know what to do during this time, and it's so difficult for me. And what I would do as a principal, I would get on Facebook Live and get on Instagram Live just to provide them with opportunities to see my face and hear my voice and do the normal traditional things that we would do during school time, but with different touch points. Instead of just using the platform that the school provides, provide different platforms and different mediums that I know that they will get on. We even went so far and got national football players and DJs and had a virtual pep rally. I think like 5,000 kids all over the country showed up for it. So just different ways that we took what we were doing in the school and made it virtual and just made it fun and made it engaging. And if any school leaders watch this, I really want to encourage you that school can be fun. That school should be fun. It should be engaging. You can learn and have fun at the same time. That is not something that should be so like, what? Learning should not be like, oh, you just got to learn this math right now. No, show me how this math is applicable. And I'll say this one more thing, because I was on the news and I said this. I said, if you're not going to think outside the box and be engaging, you're going to lose your kids, because now you got to compete with video games, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. You got to compete with this. You got to compete with a whole lot of stuff that you didn't have an opportunity to compete with now. And then as you're going back in the 21-22 school year, school needs to be engaging. It needs to be something that you're rethinking how you're going back into school. Because if you think that you're going to have a no cell phone policy, if you think you're going to have a no technology policy, you're losing the battle already, because kids haven't been to school for 2 years. So there's going to be some things that you're going to have to work through to keep these young people engaged and keep them coming.
And there's some questions later on about reopening that we're going to come back to, because I think you had some good points there. But Rina, what was missing during the pandemic? Can it ever be returned, and why? Like, what do you think we missed out on?
Do you mean in terms of what we would be able to provide to students and what we didn't, or?
You know, I have it open-ended, because I think you can go anywhere you want with it, because there's so many things that really could have been missing. I could think of several things that just what was missing to you, and can it ever be returned? You know, and I'm just thinking on the bigger scale. What do you think was missing?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to community and connection almost always for everything. I think there's one thing related to that I'll get to, but I just feel like really feeling heard and really feeling listened to. I think young people really crave that and really want that. I think we all want that as people. We want to feel loved and seen and listened to. And I think spaces for that were missing. So we recently started to work with the Girl Scouts during the pandemic. And one of the biggest things the Girl Scouts partnered with us to do was to create two types of spaces. One was to create spaces for their staff and their volunteers to feel seen and heard, and to almost have a space where they're just able to talk about their experiences and share all of the things that, you know, that they've been going through as people who are running this organization. And then two, create spaces for their teens to authentically connect with each other and to talk about mental health, to talk about challenges that they were going through. And I think in a lot of ways, just like that loose, structured environment for young people and people who support young people to just like sit and have authentic conversations, I think that was fundamentally missing. And I think that's just missing from our society in general. And I think it's at least to me, it's really like kind of further affirmed that we need to build in more spaces like that, especially as life becomes more and more structured, and you know, those kind of like loose spaces start to become lost in, you know, in just like other activities that other young people might be engaged with. So I would say that's definitely the first thing, community and connection, and then going off of that, you know, the piece around just like having spaces to feel listened to.
Yeah, I definitely think the socialization was a huge issue. Does anyone else agree with that or have a different perspective on it?
Well, I feel that right now, what education is missing is that in person. So, you know, here at Green Tech, we've been trying to be as creative as possible. You know, we've done parades where we mapped out all of the students' addresses and we decorated our cars just so we could drive by, hang out the windows, and just seeing the students running from clean across their backyards just to wave. I feel like that's what's missing for them. You know, just being able to see your teacher. I know that I've been in the, you know, supermarket and, you know, see my students and they're like, can I please give you a hug? I miss you so much. So I think that in person right now is missing for them educationally. I feel like, you know, we're doing a great job with maintaining rigor and still giving, you know, providing a quality education virtually to our boys, but they are missing that in person, and that, you know, you were my safe person in school and I can tell you about, you know, things that I may be dealing with at home, but now I don't have that avenue to do so. And I need that. I need to release some things that I've been holding on to throughout this pandemic.
Dr. Johnson, I didn't know Beyonce shopped for her own groceries. What were you going to say, Mark?
I think that I got a question. Is my face blowing up on the big screen? Because it seems like I ain't even getting no big screen. Am I blowing up on the big screen right now?
Isn't that what you want?
I feel like I'm still in a little corner.
You look fabulous.
I just want to make sure I'm getting some big screen time. You know what I mean? I want to get a little shine too. Not joking. I think a few things that are missing. One thing I think that we didn't lack was sympathy. And I'm gonna differentiate between sympathy and empathy. I think we're lacking in empathy, but we're not lacking in sympathy. We hear a lot of sympathetic stories of, you know, like everybody being burnt out and everybody being so tired and everybody being so frustrated and everybody's woe is me. But, you know, I think that I read a study that said 42% of principals want to quit their job. I think we lacked empathy, meaning that we lacked really taking the time to try to see the stories and the lived stories of our children that we serve. I think administrators lack the empathy to really try to get into the shoes of their teachers and not say, oh, you're burnt out, so I'm going to lower the expectation. Oh, you're tired, so I'm going to lower the expectation. Oh, you're in poverty, so I'm going to lower the expectation. But really saying, I'm going to be empathetic, see the world through your eyes, understand what you have going on, but still maintain a high quality experience so that you can be successful leaving out of the school despite or in spite of a pandemic. So a lot of, oh, woe is me, or oh, I'm burnt out, or oh, I'm so tired, we can't do this, it's so hard, kids not connecting. Oh, well, we've always had that. But the empathy is, let me see instruction, let me see what the kids are going through, get into their skin, and then say, nevertheless, you still need to learn how to read. Nevertheless, you still, not that I'm just giving you a whole bunch of assignments and then failing you because you didn't do it, but really, really getting the world from their perspective and being empathetic to the leaders. And the last thing I'll say is we really lack creativity. I think we missed an opportunity. We missed the opportunity for schools to be able to say, since we are online, instead of me teaching Spanish, let me find someone in Puerto Rico and let's get all into a Zoom class so I can learn Spanish from that perspective. You know, let's tag in with Dr. Miller's school to see what they're doing, and let's get our best teachers teaching the content, and so that we can have a shared experience and be in Rochester and Buffalo at the same time, and be in Buffalo and New Zealand at the same time. I think we missed that opportunity to really think outside the box and really provide something real special that our kids didn't get. So I think those two things I felt were missing.
Speaking of kids getting things, what do you guys think? You think our Black and brown kids are going to get vaccinated? Or even the men that you're working with, Joe, what's the consensus? What do you think, sir?
Well, what I'm hearing from the men in our community, and we have a large community, it's almost split down the line because everybody has their own ideology and their own belief about getting vaccinated or not vaccinated. And I haven't gotten too much into getting debates with them, but it's more so of just getting them educated on it. But I've seen it almost polarizing, not just among the men, but in their homes. I'm talking about within the family where the mom or the dad, they can't agree if the children should or shouldn't. And so I don't know what other people have experienced, but that's what I'm surprised to see that much dissension even in the home, that they're not in agreement with vaccination. So I would love to hear from the other panelists what they've been exposed to and what they've been hearing.
Rina?
Yeah, a lot of our students are in families or have been a part of families that are vaccinated. I will say that they live in communities where it is also polarizing. So some families, and it's also very interesting to see friend dynamics play out, because parents might have friends who have parents who have different perspectives, but their parents inside of their home, maybe they may be like pro being vaccinated, but their friends' parents might be against being vaccinated. So I think it's been interesting seeing how that plays out in the conversations that the friends have with each other, or how friends might perceive how the other families are handling it. And it is polarizing, and sometimes I wonder how those polarizing perspectives frame the types of conversations. I've seen conversations amongst teens play out in a way that is very much like if a student comes from a family that it doesn't believe in being vaccinated, the automatic sort of like response is to alienate that teen. So it's been interesting to see kind of these dynamics play out, and how to teach the kids, or even just like work with them to figure out like, how to have conversations about this, as opposed to go to like a polarizing perspective right away. So that's been interesting to see, and think about how we can give them the tools to have more and more conversations openly with friends as we see not just, you know, these micro communities, but our world in general become more and more polarized.
Can I say I don't know, Dr. Miller, if Black or brown children or black and brown families will get vaccinated, and nor, because you got to remember, Black people got a history in this country that vaccinations and tests have not been too favorable with us. And so I'm not going to push young people. I will say my prayer is for educators. I pray that you don't weaponize COVID or weaponize not being vaccinated in the school. I pray that we don't ostracize kids for not getting vaccinated. I pray that we don't try to hurt children and bully them psychologically or socially if they're not vaccinated. So if these young people get vaccinated, I hope they do. But if they don't, I understand, right? I understand why people will not feel safe in these United States of America from our history from not getting vaccinated, right? Like, we have to be clear on the history that Black and brown people have in this country. But nevertheless, in the space of the school, my prayer is that administrators and teachers create a safe space for Black and brown children that decide not to, and not make them feel demonized if they decided not to get vaccinated.
So Dr. Johnson,
can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, please.
Add on to what Dr. Abraham said. Yeah, even amongst the men, we have a multicultural organization. Just because I'm a person of color in charge of it, you wouldn't know what color our organization is based on the men we have. It's just that I happen to be a face on it. The white men in our organization, where do all these Black people come from? And then the Black people come in, where all these white people come from? And then they're shocked to see I'm not Latino when they come in. They say, isn't he from Miami? Yeah, but I'm not Latino. But you're absolutely right, Dr. Abraham. When I see them, they want me to kind of be like force people into getting the vaccination. I said, no, and I'm trying to educate all of them. You don't understand the history and the distrust that a lot of people of color have around this issue. So we got to be sensitive to that they have to go their own route. And that's why I'm seeing it not only amongst the men, but even in their homes. But I'm realizing I'm educating my the men in our ministry or men in our organization who are not men of color. They're saying, hey, you got to be a little bit more sensitive. I say, I know, I agree, I understand, but you have to understand and empathize and say, hey, you got to know there's a story behind this that you may be unaware of. So you're absolutely right with that.
Well, I think people need to also understand, everybody, when you guys say, what is that trauma? Let's be specific. Like, there's Tuskegee, the Tuskegee Project, where I believe Black people were given syphilis. I believe there was also in parts of slavery where Black people started to migrate closer towards north, and they thought they were safer, and then were given basically operations to remove their internal organs and to abort babies and to make them sterile. I mean, there's been a long history of oppression that, I just, for some specifics of that, would create a little bit of mistrust if that happened to someone down the line.
A lot of mistrust.
That's right. So that's why I just wanted to clarify, so people who may not know what you guys were referring to, they would have an understanding. Dr. Johnson, so if I gave you $1 million and said, this is for COVID relief, how do you spend it and why? What are you going to do with the $1 million for your educational institution?
I would definitely upgrade the technology within the classrooms, because like Dr. Abraham mentioned earlier, I mean, I don't want to toot our own horn, but here at Green Tech, we did take that advantage, and we had guest speakers from all over that came in STEM class when we were learning about banking. We had bankers from, the southern states and California that came on to share their experience. So we really here took the time out to really use the technology to our advantage. But we did have some limits. So I would, definitely invest in some more subscriptions to different like brain pop, like different types of virtual things that we could add and embed in our lessons to make it better. Technology, some more smart boards, and really get away from pen and paper. This pandemic has really got me in my box, and I went from using manipulatives like, here's a block and here's this, to now I'm embedding different types of technology within my lesson. And these same manipulatives, they're dancing on the screen and they're catching all of those kids, especially my students that have ADHD, who are already hard to just maintain that attention in person. Now they're on screen and they're following all the things, and I have them more engaged virtually than I did, in person.
Well, Dr. Johnson, let me say this. Dr. Johnson, you better toot your own horn, girl, because if you don't, who else gonna do it? I mean, if you're not repping Green Tech all over the world, who else gonna do it? Y'all school is dope. I was one of the guest speakers. I had a great time over there at Green Tech. Dr. Martin, I want to say I'm from Miami too, brother. So.
Oh, all right. Homeboy from Miami. All right.
I was just down in Miami yesterday, matter of fact. So okay, I just want to say we Miamians together. Dr. Miller, I thought you would have told him that. All right,
but so anybody else? You got $1 million. How are you guys spending it? You guys got this make-believe educational organization or school. What are you guys doing with this money? How are you putting it to good use?
Let me jump. I want to jump. Can I jump in, Dr. Abraham? I want to jump.
Go ahead. You got it.
Because we're talking about Miami. I don't know what part of Miami you were from, Dr. Abraham, but I'm from Liberty City in Miami.
Carroll City. Carroll City,
yeah, one of our arch rivals, man.
You know where's that?
Carroll City Chiefs down there. That was an arch rival down there. I went to North Miami High School. But I would do, if I had $1 million, I would do what I would normally do, even if it was before COVID. And I know, Dr. Abraham, you can relate this. I would give kids exposure. I would take them on so many field trips. And this is how bad it was for me in Miami. I don't know about you, Dr. Abraham, but I grew up in Liberty City. Do you know I never even saw the beach? The whole time before I even graduated, I never saw the beach. And I lived in Miami, never got outside of my hood.
Let me tell y'all something. Whoever's listening to this, I want you to understand Liberty City. I'm 6'4", 300 pounds. I won't go to Liberty City right now. The police don't go to Liberty City after it's dark. If I'm lying, tell me I'm lying. If there's a 911 call at about 10 o'clock, the police gonna say we're gonna deal with it in the morning time. Liberty City is one of the worst cities in Florida. I even just wanted to interject. I just don't want you to just say he think Liberty City, your mind think Miami, and you think salsa dancing. No, Miami, there's a different lens of Miami, but I'm sorry. Yes, you didn't see the beach. My bad.
You're talking about no exposure whatsoever. And I would just get kids exposed. And I'm not just talking about like just taking them to the beach, but I would take them to places like that. But I'll give you another example. I was in Liberty City and never even saw a college until my first day in college. Never even had a college visit. And so what I would do with $1 million, I would get so many charter buses and I would just take kids and get them exposed to restaurants, hotels. I've never even been in a hotel growing up as a kid. And so I would just get them exposed because that changes their perspective and what they think the future could be. I would take them to neighborhoods other than the hoods, so they can see. I remember being bused to North Miami Senior High School, and I used to see the neighborhood decline from North Miami back to Liberty City when they bused us back home. And it used to make me so sad and depressed. And I thought I would never have a home. Like I would never have a yard with grass in it. Mm-hmm. So I would just give kids exposure. I know even maybe $1 million may not be enough, but it'd be a good place to start. Taking them to the beach, taking them to colleges, hotels, restaurants, just get them exposed. Yes, they can see it on the internet, but it's a difference between actually being there and sitting in the chair and be able to smell the smells and see the sounds and hear the sounds. That's what I would do.
Hey, Doc, can I just talk about that real quick?
Yes, sir.
And he made such a valuable point. And Dr. Martin, I'll say if you guys pick up that book, I talk a little bit about exposure. I was supposed to go into a gifted and talented class, and they were showing me all of these different pictures, and they asked me what these stairs were that were in the mall. I said, oh, those are because I never been to a mall. I said, oh, those are those moving stairs. They said, he is not ready for gifted and talented. This boy don't know what he's talking about. I've never been to a mall. I didn't know what an escalator was. But nevertheless, but that's that cultural piece. You got to understand who you're dealing with. But nevertheless, I will say this, just at that, what Dr. Martin was talking about is, I went to observe a teacher one time, and the teacher was teaching geometry. And he said, you know, I want you to get the circumference of a mountain and really just think about the mountain cut in half. And I observed 35 kids, face just go blank.
Right.
I cut the lesson. I said, teacher, stop talking for a minute. Has anyone ever seen a mountain before? The kid said, the one baby she had courage. She raised her head and said, is a mountain that place in Niagara Falls where all of the stuff is on? And I said, oh, she's talking about the garbage disposal place. She thought a mountain was where they piled the garbage at. So exposure is so important, because it's one thing about talking about the Niagara Falls. It's another thing about experience Niagara Falls, right? Experiencing the water, to actually see it. And again, when I say we missed an opportunity, I'm not saying everybody did, but a lot of educators missed an opportunity because we were virtual. You could have took so many field trips and took your kids to so many places around. They said 6% of teachers that were working in New York City was actually in Florida. So if you're gonna be working from Florida from your summer house, you might as well took the kids to the beach so that at least they could see the beach virtually. And don't get me started. So if I had $1 million, Dr. Miller, what are you asking for, one school or a district? Because our local school here is about to get $1 billion.
I know, so that's why I kept it small. I kept it small.
Because they're getting $1 billion, and I was listening to their plan. I said, that's what you're gonna do with $1 billion? Goodness gracious. So if I had $1 million for one school, a smaller school, I would put a significant amount of resources in the training of administrators. We have to train the leadership, because the body goes where the leader goes. Your body goes where your head goes. So if your leadership doesn't understand, even though Texas has a problem with it, and I don't care what you say, Texas, if your leadership doesn't understand culturally proficient leadership, if they don't understand culturally relevant pedagogy, I would spend a significant amount of time making sure my leaders are trained, making sure that my leadership team is exposed, training my teachers so that we are making sure that they're ready and prepared. And I would pay them to come to these PDs. It ain't nothing like some money that get people to PD. They'll go to a PD to learn, but they actually go when they get that extra money. I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying, teachers. So you want to pay them so that they could be prepared and as successful as possible, and expose them to successful schools and successful models so that they can actually be prepared. And the rest of the money, I would go into making sure that every teacher has the right technology. We're talking about, I'm thinking urban schools, have the right whiteboards in the school, because $1 million don't go that far. Making sure that we have up-to-date books and a library that allows the kids to see themselves in those books. It's nothing like picking up an old raggedy book and every time you go through the pages, ain't nobody look like you, right? And then also invest in different technological pieces where kids can feel engaged and feel motivated. We really have to start dumping money into the building, how it looks and how it makes children feel when they walk into that school. But our leaders and our teachers need real professional development. They need to be exposed to really successful schools, and our kids need great resources so that they can feel like they're on par with their suburban counterparts, and then they have the opportunity to excel.
So I'm going to give we're going to get ready to close in a few minutes, but everybody's going to get
closing.
Everybody's going to get 60 seconds. We don't spend 30 minutes on the Marck Abraham show. we got
my bad. Hey, listen, I get excited. You know, I get excited when I get to hang out with fellow educators. I apologize. My bad.
Not at all, brother. You're doing what you're supposed to do, but I still got to give you the business. So everybody gets 60 seconds. And so if you had the power, so you got the money, now you got to get the power and the respect, right? So if you had the power to make every school in America do this when reopening in the fall, what would that be? And you only got 60 seconds to answer it. And I'm gonna save you for last too, brother. Let me go over to Rina. You got 60 seconds. You got the money. You had the money, but now you got the power. You got the magic wand. Anything that you want, what would you want that to be when reopening in the fall? What would that look like?
It's very simple. I would reflection circles. That's what it would be. 2 times a day, morning and at the end of the day, reflection circles.
Why?
I think it's important to have teens or young people, students, to be able to have spaces where they're connecting with each other, like really diving deep in like how their day was or what came up for them or what they learned, what they would want to do better for the next day. Even having like prompts, you know, what would you do? What are you going to do differently tomorrow that you didn't do today? Like something as simple as that, compounded over time, I think can have like incredible effects.
Thank you. Dr. Johnson, 60 seconds, same question. If you had the power to make every school in America do this when reopening in the fall, what would that be?
I would say hear those baby stories. Once you hear them and you give them a platform to let the teacher know what they've been through, then you can teach to their individual minds. But you have to know where they're coming from, where they've been, so you can have a clear understanding of where they need to go.
All right, Dr. Martin.
Yes, mine is kind of biased, but pretty simple. If you really want to see real change in education, help fathers become better men. Help fathers become better men. 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts are from fatherless homes. 75% of youth who are in alcohol and drug abuse centers are from fatherless homes. 7% of juveniles in state-operated institutions are from fatherless homes. Are you hearing a trend here? 85% of men sitting in prison grew up in fatherless homes. Dr. Miller, Dr. Abraham, me, we're the exception, not the rule. We're the exception, not the rule. My point is this: if you fix the father, you repair the family. You repair the family, you help the home. You help the home, you empower education. You empower education, you change a nation. And if you change the nation, you impact the world. It starts with the father.
Good stuff. Dr. Abraham, power.
Man, how am I going to follow Dr. Martin? He was so passionate. Man, this is ridiculous. You just made me go first. No, I'm joking. All right, so if I had the power, this is what I would do. And I seen you quote the biggie, money, power, respect. I ain't even going to say that. But nevertheless, if I had the power to, I would do this. I would make summer school mandatory for all kids around the country. I think they need to go back into school so that the principals, teachers, administrators can actually physically get an opportunity to meet these babies that they've never met before in middle school and high school. That's number one. Second, I would cut summer school at least 3 weeks before the start of school. I would ensure that all of my administrators and teachers had a strong reopening plan so that their kids will come back to a school that's clean, a school that's safe, and a school that's fun, and a school that's going to focus on academics and the social emotional piece, not just the social emotional piece, but really having high expectations. Lastly, I have to say this: I would have everyone in the country join me this summer for our Leadership Institute that we're having to support administrators around the country with strong reopening plans. I got to say that, Dr. Miller. I had to say that. So
I know it was coming.
You know it's coming. I got to say it, brother.
but we're supposed to get it out there because they will get good information. They will learn a lot, and you will get some of the top-notch strategies that you can utilize and be very applicable. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening. I'd like to thank Global Minded and Carol Carter for creating the platform for us to talk about this. And we just really want kids to be successful and emerge stronger than ever before. And thank you to the experts who came out and had a conversation with us today. I'm going to turn it over to Carol, and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I hope all of you listening and also listening in the future when we post this tomorrow to the YouTube channel feel, as I do, really energized and fortified by what people shared in this session. And I know Paul and I were on the call first and we're both like, okay, we've got a million things to do. And sometimes when you have so much to do and you're able to plug in to the insights and the wisdom of the people that are around you, you are so much more able to do really hard things. And that's, we're all called right now to do really hard things and to step up to the plate in a big way. And I think all of you provided some really great ways to do that. So I want to share just a couple of other sessions yet this week for those of you who are able to join. Tomorrow we have business leaders from PricewaterhouseCoopers, from Disney, a bunch of different companies talking about from isolation to compassionate connection. How organizations can better support their employees in crisis and beyond. How can we have organizations that don't have to have people be the perfect people? People are human. And how can our organizations be more human in allowing those people who work for them to be who they are? So that's coming up. And then on Friday, we've got a session called Trauma-Informed Teaching, Coaching, and Managing. Healing to holistic wholeness and health. So that's the rest of our health week this week. And then next week is our first Gen Leadership class. And we'd love to be able to work with all of you who work with students and to recommend them, and including those of you from Green Tech who have, rising juniors or seniors. All of your students are welcome, whether they're in college or not. They're incredible role models who will be sharing their wisdom on how to do well in college next week. And that'll be every day next week at 4 o'clock Eastern time. So thanks to all of you. It's so great to see you guys. Love being with you, and put on your calendar for next year, June 22, 23, 24 in Denver, where you can see mountains, you can see different kinds of people, those experiences that how Joe would spend his $1 million. And I wanted Latoya to save her $1 million, because I think we need to say to these big tech companies that made billions in the pandemic, you need to come to the table to give our schools these resources, so that Latoya is not spending her money that way. She's spending money on experiences for her students, because the technology is being given by the gigantic companies who have the funding to be able to give it to us. So I think we just got to keep putting that out there until your schools are resourced from these technology companies in ways that they need to grow the next generation of workers for those tech companies. So we can all work together to make that happen. But thanks to all of you. It was really a delight, and looking forward to being in touch with all of you. And you'll see Dr. Paul Miller is here once a month. So anybody who wants to join for another time, Paul always has like the most amazing guests and conversations. So thanks for being part of Global Minded 2021, Reboot Resilience, and Rebound Remarkable. And so glad to be with you all. Thanks so much.